Adam and Eve, the first not to read Apple's terms and conditions. What a coincidence it was this week when Apple released the iPhone 7. A coincidence because Adam and Eve were into apples as well. Our story for today has some interesting and funny things in them that I'd like to talk about. As you might have noticed, in the Bible we have two creation accounts. The first one that sounds like a song, the first day, evening and morning, the second day. The second one is the one we have for today. The first one seems to be more about structure, order. The second one has to do more with relationships. If you notice in the first one, does anybody remember when Adam and Eve were created, what day that was? Okay, you're all going back to confirmation. On the sixth day, after everything else was created, all the vegetation and everything. In this story, Adam and Eve were created right in the beginning, especially Adam. But and also you might know, I wanted to point out that in this version, Adam is given a job, and that job is the gardener. And this is really interesting because if you remember in the resurrection story where Mary sees Jesus, she mistakes him for a gardener. I think that's very interesting. Another interesting thing we have is we have talking serpents. That's strange, right? You see a lot of talking serpents, except for maybe the gecko from the Geico commercials. And then we have a theological discussion between a serpent and Eve. Now, theological discussions are very rare anyway. But my daughter was talking to me about a theological discussion she had with a serpent recently. She was on a run. And as you may know, during this time of the year, snakes like to come out into the road and sun themselves. Well, she was running along a sidewalk, and she saw a snake come out on the sidewalk. And their theological discussion went something like this. Ah! It's interesting that the woman, that Eve, had the theological discussion about what God said and what God didn't say, because she wasn't there. When God gave the command to Adam, she was not there. It's also interesting that in the discussion, she adds a little bit. God had told Adam, you may eat of any tree in the garden, but the tree in the center, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat of it, for on that day you shall die. And Eve said, oh, you shall not eat of it. We cannot even touch it, or we'll die. In the first creation story, it says that the man and the woman were created in the image of God. And here the serpent says, if you eat of the fruit, you will be like God. So they ate, and then they covered themselves. And when they heard God walking in the garden, they hid. Now, some say that's the most interesting part of all. And our friend over here, Father Tristan, from Christ Church, Episcopal Church, he thinks that this is a really funny episode. And if you think about it, I never thought about it this way. They hid from God. How do you hide from God? The psalmist in Psalm 139 says, "Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely darkness shall cover me and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark for you. The night is as bright as the day, for the darkness is as light to you." Now that I think about it, it is pretty funny to think that we can hide from God. But I guess we've all done it, or we've all tried to do it at one time or another. And maybe we try to do it all the time. Why would Adam and Eve hide from God? Okay, this is good because my children are not here. But when I was in 5th grade, I received my report card. And it wasn't like today where you have these computer-generated report cards. This was paper and ink. And when I received my report card, believe it or not, it was not all A's. So I took my report card into the bathroom at the school with a pen that had ink that I thought matched the teacher's pen pretty well. And I changed my grades. And when I got finished with it, it looked a lot better than the teacher had it originally. And believe it or not, the teacher and my parents noticed the changes right away. That was one of the worst educational experiences of my life. It would have been so much better if I would have just faced the consequences right away. It wouldn't have been good, but it would have been so much better. Why did I do it? Why did Adam and Eve do it? Why did they hide? Try to hide from God. I think, one of two reasons, maybe both. One, they didn't want to face the consequences for their actions. And secondly, maybe intermeshed with the first, they didn't trust that God would forgive them. Is that why we hide or try to hide from God? We don't want to face the consequences of our actions, and we don't trust that God will forgive us, that God is gracious. And maybe the way we hide is that we pretend that God doesn't even know what goes on, or God doesn't even care, God doesn't see us. We just deny that possibility. We need to remember what it says in Psalm 139. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? And the answer is nowhere. This week, I want to challenge you to think about this. Do you hide from God? Do you even realize that God can see and knows everything that you do? Do you try to deny that? Do you try to hide from that? And if you do, is it only because you want to avoid the consequences of your actions? Or is it that you don't fully trust God? You don't fully trust that if God knew who you really were, what you really did, That he wouldn't love you anymore, or that he would zap you or something? But as you think about that, I have another psalm to share with you, and it's one of my favorites. Psalm 145. The Lord is gracious and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. The Lord is good to all, and his compassion is over all that he has made. Over all that he has made, over the whole creation, you and me. Amen.